My sixth graders, we have just begun multiplying fractions, and you guys have done an amazing job in class, but hopefully this video will help answer any questions that you have. We have 3 or 4 different examples that we're going to be working with today. The first one is just simple multiplication of regular fractions. Then, after we finish with that kind of problem, we're then going to include how do I multiply fractions in whole numbers and then fractions with mixed numbers. So get ready, here we go. The first thing I want us to look at is the fact that there are 2 different methods that we can use to multiply fractions. The one that you guys seem to find the easiest to start off with is the first method, and that is simply when you multiply your numerators, then you multiply your denominators, and after you've done that, you simplify, which is another way of saying you reduce it to its simplest terms. Or the second option is where you look for a numerator and a denominator, a top and the bottom, to simplify first, and then you multiply your numerators and denominators, and then just double check to make sure everything is reduced and ready for their final answer. So let's examine those 2 different methods first and see what we can do. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, so bear with me for just a minute. There we go, that's a little better. This is an example of the very first method that we've talked about in class, where you identify your fraction having a numerator and a denominator, and you multiply it times another numerator and denominator, and you get your answer and then you reduce it. So that's what we're going to start off looking at right off the bat. And this is how you've seen me do it in class. If I'm going to multiply my numerators and multiply my denominators, you're going to see this. 3 times 1 is 3. There's our fraction bar. And 4 times 10 is 40. Now, I can't reduce this anymore because 3 is not a factor of 40. There's no way I can make that any simpler than it already is. So that's my final answer. Now let's look at this next one. Again, with this method, I multiply my numerators, I multiply my denominators, and then I reduce. 9 times 2 is 18 over 30 because 10 times 3 is 30. Now both of these numbers are even, and so I know for a fact I can start off by dividing the top and the bottom by 2. And remember, I want to do the same thing to the top and to the bottom because that allows my fraction to maintain balance. I don't want to do something to get it off kilter, so I have to do the same thing to the top and the bottom. 18 divided by 2 is 9, and 30 divided by 2 is 15. Okay, but look at this. There is still a factor, a number, that goes into 9 and also goes into 15 to make this even more simple, and that's 3. So let's divide the top and the bottom by 3, and that's going to give me 3/5 as my final answer. That's our first method, to where you just multiply your numerators, multiply your denominators, you get your answer, and then you reduce. Now I'm going to switch gears with you, and we're going to use the exact same example from before, that 9/10 times 2/3, but we're going to use the second method, which is where we're going to look to see if there's anything that we can simplify first, get our answer, and then see if any other reducing is needed. So let's explain that. Remember, I've told you that when we simplify first, we have to look at numerators and denominators. You have to be looking at the tops and bottoms. You can't come to school wearing 2 tops and no bottoms, and you can't come to school wearing 2 bottoms and no tops because, honestly, I'll make fun of you. And so will everybody else. So we have to look at the numerators and the denominators separately and see, is there anything in here that we can simplify? So let's look right now. Is there any factor that goes into 9 that also goes into 10? Nope. Is there a factor that goes into 9 that also goes into 3? Yep. 3 is my little number. It goes into my bigger number. So I know right here I can simplify this right off the bat. And I can make that more simple. 3 divided by 3 gives me a 1. 9 divided by 3 gives me a 3. So that simplified that. Now let's look at our other tops and bottoms. 2, can't do anything with 1. That's as simple as it can get. But 2 is a factor of 10. This little number goes into that big number without having any remainders left over. So that lets me know, okay, I can simplify this. That's going to become 1 because 2 divided by 2 is 1. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So now look at what I'm left with. A 3, a 1, and I can multiply those. And a 5 and a 1. I can multiply those. And look how much easier that makes our math. 3 times 1 is 3. 5 times 1 is 5. And isn't that the exact same answer that we received here? But this is showing how we simplified first, we got our answer, and we can double check to make sure no other reducing is needed. Go back and look at that one if you need to again. This is how we simplify first and then reduce. Now, I have a couple notes for you about that second method. If you choose to use method 2, these are the questions that you need to ask yourself first before you start simplifying. First question, when looking at my numerators and denominators, remember, it can't be 2 in the same location. It can't be 2 tops or 2 bottoms. It has to be one of each. Can the littlest number go into the bigger number without any remainder? If yes, then divide the numerator and the denominator by that little number, just like we divided 3 into 9 and 3 into 3. If you look at the tops and bottoms and you don't see anything that you can simplify by, and you answer that question as no, then you've got to find the factors of both of those numbers and divide by the greatest common factor, or in math we call that the GCF. And what we use to find those factors is the rainbow trick. Now, okay, I've just thrown out some vocabulary words. Let's think about this. Factors are 2 numbers that you multiply together to get a product. A product meaning an answer to a multiplication problem. The greatest common factor, or GCF, is the biggest number that 2 numbers have in common when you list all of their factors. And we find those by using the rainbow trick. So let's do that with an example, just to refresh your memory. Guys, this means you're going to have to remember how to do this. And I know for some of you that's easy breezy, but for some of you it is not. It is not at all. If we have this fraction, 27 over 54, man, that's a whopping fraction. Let's find all the factors of 27. Well, we know 1 times 27 equals 27, and we know 3 times 9 equals 27. Look, there's our rainbow. Those are all the factors of 27. Now let's do the factors of 54. There's a lot more of those. We have 1 times 54. We have 2 times 27. We have 3 times 18. And then we have 6 times 9. Okay, these are the 2 numbers that we multiply together to get our product that we wanted. So those are all of the factors of 54. Now, in order to find the GCF, we have to identify what is the number that's biggest that goes into both of them. Well, let's circle what they have in common. We have a 3 in common, and we have a 9 in common. 9 has to be the one that we use because it's the biggest. So what we would do then is come over here and divide the top and the bottom by 9. Our answer would be 3/6. Look what I lost and forgot. Looky there and looky there. If I had done that and been more observant, I wouldn't have to do one more step. But I didn't do it right. See, Miss Jen's not perfect. 27 is the greatest common factor in those numbers. Okay, so now we have the next type of fraction problem. How do I multiply a fraction by a whole number? These are the steps. You change the whole number to a fraction by putting a peg leg underneath it, and then you multiply as usual. So we're going to change this 3/7 times 5 into being 3/7 times 5 over 1. Here's my peg leg right there. Then we're going to multiply our tops, multiply our bottoms, and get 15 over 7, and we've got to convert that and reduce it. 7 goes into 15 2 times. 2 times 7 is 14. The difference is 1 being our numerator, and we bring our 7 over because it's our constant, so our final answer is 2 1/7. There's one last type of problem you've got to know how to do, and that is, how do I multiply a fraction times a mixed number or two mixed numbers together? Well, you've got to be able to convert each of the mixed numbers to an improper fraction and then multiply and simplify as usual. If I have 1/2 times 3 2/5, you guys remember from our notes that we convert this by multiplying our denominator times our whole number. That gives us 15, and we add the 2 to it. So that actually means that we're going to have 17 over 5. There is no way for us to reduce that, so we're going to multiply our tops and bottoms and get 17 over 10. And when we change that to a mixed number, 10 goes into 17 one time. That's 1 times 10. We have 7 left over, and our constant is moved over for a 10 on bottom. But what if I have two mixed numbers? Well, we're going to do the same process. Multiply and add. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7 over 3, times 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3 over 2. Now look, I have a top and a bottom that I can simplify first. So I'm going to change those and make my math a little bit easier. That's going to give me 7 times 1, which is 7 over 2, 2 times 1, and then I'm going to change that to be a mixed number. 2 goes into 7 3 times. That's 6 with 1 left over. So my final answer is 1/2. I know I'm going through this quickly. Y'all go back and watch it again or rewind it and watch this section if you need to. The last thing that you're going to have to know how to do is this. How can you determine if your answer to a problem like these are going to either increase or decrease without doing any calculations? Guys, that's what you're going to have to know how to do. And here it is. If you multiply a number by a fraction and that fraction is less than 1, your answer is going to decrease. For the example, 1/2 times 2/5. We start off with 1/2. We multiply it times a fraction that's less than 1, so our answer is decreasing. If you multiply a fraction by a number that's like a whole number or a mixed number, that means it's greater than 1, your answer is going to increase. For example, if I start off with 1/2 and I multiply it times 5, I do the math and I'm going from 1/2 to 2 1/2. So my number is increasing. Guys, you're doing great. Hang in there with these fractions. I'm super proud of you.